For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill S.1082 to provide for a temporary extension of programs under the Small Business Act and the Small Business Investment Act of 1958 and for other purposes.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 1082, an act to provide for an additional temporary extension of programs under the Small Business Act and the Small Business Investment Act of 1958 and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Graves, and the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velazquez, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members shall have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
The legislation we have before us is a short-term extension of programs that helps our nation's small businesses. Last week, the House passed a bill by voice vote to extend these programs for 4 months until the end of the fiscal year. Unfortunately, that bill was used as a vehicle to pass the Patriot Act authorization, so we have a new bill before us today. Like the bill the House passed last week, this legislation extends the authorization of the Small Business Innovative Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs until the end of the fiscal year. These 2 programs provide R&D dollars to small businesses to create jobs, spur innovative ideas to the market, and solve federal agency problems, all at no additional cost to the government. Secondly, the bill extends for 2 months until July 31st, 2011, the authorization of several other programs at the Small Business Administration. Among them is the Pre-Disaster Mitigation Program that provides loans to small businesses so they can implement technology that will reduce the impact of disasters on their operations. With the recent devastation we've seen in the Midwest, including in my home state of Missouri, and with the hurricane season right around the corner, it's imperative that this program continue for small firms who wish to bolster their disaster plans. Mr. Speaker, this is bipartisan legislation that is the support of the administration as well as the leadership of both parties on the other side of the Capitol. It is important that we do not let these programs lapse, because they will expire if we do not pass this legislation today. This is the last day. I urge my colleagues to support our nation's small businesses and vote yes on S.1082, and I'd reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Missouri reserves his time. The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velazquez, is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the role of small businesses in moving the economy forward has never been more important. Making up over 99% of all U.S. firms, they are critical to innovation, wealth creation, and most importantly, employment gains. Many look to the SBA for assistance, using its loan, contracting, and training programs to start up or expand. Unfortunately, the legislation before us, while seemingly uncontroversial, could make it harder for small businesses to access the very tools and resources. This bill, if passed, will break with long-standing House precedent and choose winners and losers among SBA programs. By doing so, it will create confusion among small firms seeking to use the agency's initiatives. As many of you know, since September 30th, 2006, the SBA has been operating under a series of 12 temporary extensions. While these extensions have varied in length, they have always treated all of the agency's programs and initiatives equally. This has resulted in all of the SBA programs operating unimpeded, ensuring that small businesses have ready access to the tools and resources they need. Unfortunately, S.1082 takes the unprecedented step of setting different authorization periods for certain SBA programs, creating a maze of confusing dates and deadlines for small businesses. During a time when efforts are being made to reduce regulatory burden, Congress should make certain that it is not adding to it by its own unnecessary actions. Given the extraordinary nature of S.1082, it should not be considered and fast-tracked on the suspension calendar, which is typically reserved for uncontroversial measures. Instead, such a unique and precedent-setting measure should go through regular order, where members will have an opportunity to amend this unexpected and highly unusual piece of legislation. At a minimum, this will enable members to have more time to understand the detrimental impact this legislation could have on small businesses. Small businesses such as those represented by the U.S. Women's Chamber of Commerce also oppose this legislation. Voting against this extension will not affect any agency program in a meaningful way. Small businesses will still be able to secure financing, receive contracts, and access training through the agency's initiatives. What a vote against this legislation will do, however, is ensure that we produce a more equitable piece of legislation that treats all agencies' initiatives fairly. If parties are serious about helping small businesses, they will reject this measure and work expeditiously to approve a more responsible extension. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The woman from New York reserves her time. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
I don't have any speakers, Mr. Speaker, so I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman
If the gentleman
reserves.
has no further speakers, I will yield back.
The gentlewoman from New York yields back her time. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the ranking member. In closing, just let me reiterate, this is a simple short-term extension of programs that are very important to our nation's small business. We aren't changing any policy here. We're just extending them until hopefully we can work out the differences with the other body on the other side of the Capitol. Again, I urge my colleagues to vote aye or vote yes on S.1082 and keep these programs running so we can hopefully work out these differences. With that, I would yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Missouri yields back his time, all time having expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 1082? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
Oh.
In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the gentlewoman from New York is recognized.
I ask for a recorded vote.
The gentlewoman is asking for the yeas and nays.
Correct.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed.